Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. The Trump Putin meeting in Alaska brought no breakthrough in peace negotiations over the war in Ukraine. Now the Europeans will consult their next steps to help end the bloody conflict. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Ukrainians and European leaders react to Trump-Putin talks. No end to anti-government protests in Serbia inside. And a deadlock in plastic pollution negotiations continues. No ceasefire, instead a vague idea of a peace deal in the future. A high-stakes summit between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin wrapped up in Alaska, but despite a dramatic setting, the meeting delivered more spectacle than substance. Here's Jeremy Hołodniuk's report on the Trump-Putin meeting.
A warm handshake on the red carpet amidst a lineup of modern fighter jets, accompanied by a dramatic flyover. For some, it was a show of force. For others, a gesture of respect. This is how President Trump welcomed his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin during the first meeting between American and Russian heads of state since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. After a ride in the beast, the presidents moved for talks, but Putin was not keen on answering any questions. After nearly 3 hours, the two leaders said they had made some progress.
We had an extremely productive meeting and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left.
Putin, meanwhile, gained the global spotlight for reiterating Russian narrative.
We have always considered and consider the Ukrainian people, and I have said this multiple times, to be fraternal, as strange as it may sound in today's conditions. We have the same roots, and everything that is happening for us is a tragedy and great pain. Therefore, our country is sincerely interested in putting an end to this.
Both leaders made brief statements but took no questions, leaving uncertainty over what exactly was achieved and whether this summit was a step forward or just political theater.
We don't know if there is any real effect of this summit apart of two leaders met and apart of probable next meeting, Trump and Putin.
The summit was full of subtle messages, with experts trying to make out their meaning.
Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening.
By saying this,
Thank you.
and Trump kind of, vaguely agreeing that, yeah, maybe Moscow, maybe somewhere else, I think they have maybe subconsciously, in Trump's case, agreed that they will meet again, but again without Zelenskyy.
While Trump spoke of great progress, some see vagueness and a dent in his deal-maker image.
You just saw him seem a lot more tame. He was less emphatic. He obviously, if you've ever watched President Trump talk, he talks with his hands all the time. He does a lot of this expressive stuff. You weren't really seeing much of that. And so I think he was very deflated. That's what I saw at the end. Either that or just very tired. But to me, it looked like he was a bit deflated.
Critics say the summit was more about optics than outcomes. With no joint statement or a clear follow-up plan, the Anchorage meeting leaves Ukraine's future and the path to peace uncertain.
It's really up to President Zelenskyy to get it done. And I would also say the European nations, they have to get involved a little bit.
Report for TVP World by Jeremy Hołodniuk.
And we're going now live to Kiev. Our correspondent Alex Kadier has been following Ukrainian reactions to the Alaskan summit. Good evening, Alex. So what sentiments prevailed in the Ukrainian president's office? Is it rather hope for a peace deal with strong security guarantees from the West, or disappointment in no immediate ceasefire?
Well, good evening. The answer to that will be somewhere in between those two things. We've seen Axios reporting that the call between President Zelenskyy and Donald Trump was difficult between the two leaders. Of course, the proposals put forward by Vladimir Putin are very, very difficult to accept for the Ukrainian side. We heard from President Zelenskyy himself posting on X just a few hours ago. Let's have a listen to his statement.
We had a long and substantive conversation with US President Donald Trump. We started with one-on-one talks before inviting European leaders to join us. This call lasted for more than an hour and a half, including about an hour of our bilateral conversation with President Trump. Ukraine reaffirms its readiness to work with maximum effort to achieve peace. President Trump informed about his meeting with the Russian leader and the main points of their discussion. It is important that America's strength has an impact on the development of the situation. We support President Trump's proposal for a trilateral meeting between Ukraine, the USA and Russia. Ukraine emphasizes that key issues can be discussed at the level of leaders, and a trilateral format is suitable for this. On Monday, I will meet with President Trump in Washington, D.C. to discuss all of the details regarding ending the killing and the war. I'm grateful for the invitation.
Well, if we look forward to that meeting on Monday between President Zelenskyy and President Trump, we just heard in my colleague Jeremy's report just a few seconds ago, President Trump saying it's now up to President Zelenskyy to make a deal. Perhaps that implies that the proposal put forward by the Russian side and discussed with the US president is to his liking. To be clear, we do not know at the moment. We can but speculate, reading the tea leaves at the moment. The proposal, to remind you, from the Russian side, they would freeze the front line in two of Ukraine's regions, in Kherson and in Zaporizhia. In exchange, they expect the entirety of the Donbass, two different regions, to be handed over to them, including the heavily fortified cities of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, which would be crucial for any future defense of the country. That seems fairly impossible for the Ukrainian leader to accept, and there will be some difficult negotiations for President Zelenskyy. Of course, we remember the last meeting in the Oval Office, rather disastrous for the Ukrainian side as well. So President Zelenskyy will be walking a bit of a tightrope on his way to Washington to convince Donald Trump that the deal put forward by the Russians is not fair, is not workable, is not sustainable, and to push for something better. Maciej?
Alex Kadir reporting from Kyiv. Thank you very much, Alex. Stay safe. And the end of the war in Ukraine is closer than ever before, says British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. His Polish counterpart, Donald Tusk, appeals for unity during the decisive phase of negotiations over Ukraine's future. The coalition of the willing is gathering ahead of President Zelenskyy's Monday trip to Washington to consult the next steps. Randy Potts reports.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much.
The mood in Europe after the summit in Alaska was generally critical and followed by persistent calls for unity throughout the continent.
Any lasting peace must be accompanied by unwavering security guarantees. I welcome, in this regard, the readiness of the United States to contribute. We will work on this with them and with all our partners in the coalition of the willing, with whom we will meet again soon to make concrete progress.
On a phone call soon after the meeting in Alaska, European leaders and U.S. President Donald Trump discussed possible security guarantees for Ukraine.
The good news is that America is ready to participate in such security guarantees and is not leaving it to the Europeans alone.
As reported by Reuters, these guarantees could be similar to the alliance's Article 5. Under this clause, NATO regards any attack launched on one of its 32 members as an attack on all.
The game for the future of Ukraine, the security of Poland and all of Europe has entered a decisive phase. Today it is even more clear that Russia respects only the strong, and Putin has once again proven to be a clever and ruthless player. That is why it is so important to maintain the unity of the entire West.
On top of what has been said so far, European leaders made this joint statement on Saturday.
The coalition of the willing is ready to play an active role. No limitations should be placed on Ukraine's armed forces or on its cooperation with third countries. Russia cannot have a veto against Ukraine's pathway to EU and NATO.
As most European voices continued to express disappointment in the Alaska meeting and stress their support of Ukraine, a few leaders seemed pleased with the results.
The path does not lead through insulting the Russian political leadership through sanctions, but through constructive talks. The meeting of Presidents Trump and Putin officially launched the standardization of relations between the United States and the Russian Federation.
Like Prime Minister Fico, most Ukrainians also believe the Friday summit was primarily a win for Russian President Vladimir Putin.
For Putin, it was important to have a very sympathetic atmosphere, very loyal atmosphere of meeting with Trump, restore diplomatic relations, restore economic relations, at least to start this restoration now, and to show that this is Zelenskyy or Ukraine or coalition of willing are those to blame for lack of a ceasefire. It will have direct impact over Russia's position in an international arena. This is end of international isolation of Putin and of Russia since the beginning of a large-scale invasion of Ukraine.
The main area of agreement between Washington and European capitals? Whatever the outcome, Europe must be involved. European leaders and the Coalition of the Willing plan to discuss possible defense guarantees in a video call scheduled for Sunday. For TVP World, this is Randy Potts.
The summit in Alaska has been widely commented on both in the US and Europe, while the word disappointment is the most common to describe the outcome of the meeting. There is also hope for the situation of children abducted from Ukraine by Russians. Anastasia Yanchenko has this report.
Less than a day after Trump and Putin parted ways, a new protest erupted in Alaska, condemning the outcome of the meeting and its warm atmosphere.
I feel like welcoming a war criminal onto U.S. soil validates, legitimizes what they're doing, and as the U.S., we should be taking a stand against that. So that's why I'm here, is to support Ukraine and to show my upset at not only our administration, but our local senators that they're not speaking up against this as well.
Nothing good. I mean, maybe something will come out that will be either a big nothing burger or not good for Ukraine.
In Kyiv, Ukrainians were even more disappointed by the Alaska talks. Many had hopes that at least a ceasefire would be agreed.
It's very complicated. We expect real action and an end to the war. We expect Ukraine's victory.
Well, this is not the first time Russia has started such a major conflict. They barged into Georgia, nobody invited them there. And what did they do? And what was left after their, quote, peace? The same will happen here. And why does no one react to this? Why? Well, it must be convenient for someone.
Mr. Putin, will you agree to a ceasefire?
President Donald Trump's position on Ukraine remains ambiguous, but Trump's wife, Melania, proved to be far more categorical. During the summit, Melania Trump delivered a letter to Vladimir Putin. The First Lady raised the issue of Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. Officially, 20,000 children have been reported taken, but the real number may be much higher.
When Putin's commissioner, Maria Lvova-Belova, announced that 744,000 Ukrainian children have been registered in Russia. And we still now have no idea who are that Ukrainian children, from which territories, and how many of them unaccompanied minors, and where are they, their condition of life.
The exact content of Melania Trump's letter remains unknown. However, this is not the first time she has shown distrust towards Russian leadership. Earlier, Melania apparently helped convince her husband to ramp up military aid to Ukraine and to take a tougher stance towards Moscow.
I go home, I tell the First Lady, and I spoke to Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation. She said, oh, really? Another city was just hit.
But this is not convincing for the protesters in Anchorage or the residents of Kyiv, who believe the summit was a win for Putin and not for Trump. This report for TVP World, Anastasia Yanchenko.
I could see it possibly.
Serbia has been engulfed in violence as the anti-government protests reach their peak this weekend. With neither side willing to back down, there is little hope for a quick de-escalation of tensions. Pavel Trzaskowski has this report.
From this to this. Anti-government protests in Serbia that started peacefully in November last year have recently escalated into major unrest, and the last few days were particularly violent. On Friday night, police used tear gas and crowd control equipment against protesters who threw pyrotechnics at them. And on Thursday, anti-government protesters demolished the office of the ruling Serbian Progressive Party in Novi Sad, the city where the canopy of a railway station collapsed in November last year, tragically killing 16 people. This event led to a countrywide demonstrations, with protesters accusing the government of state capture and demanding early elections and government accountability for the disaster. And the recent opposition is not limited to Serbia's two largest cities. Demonstrations were held across the country this week, and in many locations, anti-government groups clashed with government supporters.
Dozens, possibly more than 70-80 citizens were injured by the blockaders. We are still waiting for information on the extent of their injuries.
This escalation of violence might be attributed to the frustration of some protester groups, but also to the inside job and provocations of the ruling SNS party.
Some members of secret services are part of the protests, and the protesters managed to keep a sort of a unified front.
And the party's leadership, including President Alexander Vučić, choose to play the scale of the protest movement down.
The protesters show all their hysteria, all their despair, because there are few of them and their number will only decrease. They know they failed.
The increasing violence on the streets of Serbia deepens the polarization of the society, providing fuel for the protest movement on one hand, but solidifying the support for the ruling party on the other. And there might be no sudden stop to this.
I'm guessing that with time, this violence will perhaps increase, because it is working also for the government, the violence, to show that the other side, these are people who want to destroy the country.
Both Vučić and his SNS party have about 1.5 years of their tenure left, with both presidential and general elections expected to be held in December next year. And given their refusal to bow down to the protesters' demands, Serbia will most likely see more of these scenes over this period. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
The UN countries have once again failed to find a solution to global plastic pollution. While the states rich in oil want the problem to be dealt with by recycling, 100 countries believe it should be tackled by simply producing less plastic. Aisha Bache reports on the plastic pollution deadlock.
This is what plastic pollution looks like around the world.
For the first time in history, the world is within a reach of a legally binding international instrument to end plastic pollution. This is a challenging task, but a deeply necessary one. We are facing a global crisis.
And yet, these scenes may perhaps take decades, even centuries to clear up, as intergovernmental negotiations for a treaty on plastic pollution have failed in the auspices of the United Nations in Geneva.
As co-chairs of the High Ambition Coalition, we are truly sad to see that we will not have a treaty to end plastic pollution here in Geneva.
After nearly 3 years of deliberations, the Geneva meeting was meant to be the final round of negotiations after previous talks in Busan, South Korea, failed to secure a deal.
We at UNEP are here to support this process, and we will not stop. We will continue to engage in the multilateral process as member states desire.
But some NGOs believe that multilateralism is precisely the problem.
Consensus is dead. You cannot have a deal where all the countries who produce and export plastics and oil can decide the terms of what the deal is going to be, because the result of that is what we had here today, which is a failure.
Others have called for a reform of the process if any solution is to be reached.
They need to fix once and for all the decision-making process in this process, so that countries don't have a veto right.
The delegates said the talks lacked a strategy to overcome the deadlock, with so-called petrostates blocking stricter measures.
Plastic production fuels GDP, as simple as that, and the employment, especially in these oil exporting nations.
Beyond the negotiating halls, the consequences of failure are visible in the oceans.
Come on. Go, boy. Plastic packaging strip. One of our main entanglement products we're dealing with. Most of the seals we catch are first-year pups, and anything they find in the water they will play with. They swim through it, they play with it, and eventually they get stuck in it.
And even in our bodies.
The nanoplastic can be present in placentas, lungs, and even in the bloodstreams of humans. We simply don't know what will be the evolutionary consequence of its presence.
For Geneva, the failure is another blow to multilateralism. For the world's seas, rivers, and ecosystems at large, it means no relief, as studies show that the petrochemical industry, worth nearly $700 billion last year, is forecast to grow by more than 20% by 2030. For TVP World, I'm Aisha Badja.
The Trump Putin meeting in Alaska has raised more questions and provided answers to the current state of peace process in Ukraine. What are the main takeaways from yesterday's summit and what will happen next? We'll talk about it with Martin Sklana, Slovakia's former defense minister. Good evening.
Good evening.
So no ceasefire, but rather a full peace deal with security guarantees is on the table now. What has changed in Anchorage?
Well, this is exactly what has changed. We see President Trump embarking on a new line of politics and policy as he is trying to actually stand to his promise and solve this crisis. And he's been struggling with that for the past 6 months or so, even before he took office. So we have seen Vladimir Putin arriving in Anchorage, smiling, being well received by President Trump. On the red carpet with applause. You could say that it was a reception that was not appropriate for a meeting like this. President Putin was well prepared. We saw him speaking from prepared notes, even at the press conference, and he exactly knew what he was trying to get out of the meeting. And I think he got much more than President Trump was able to secure in that meeting. And here we are dealing with the outcomes, which are not sure. We are not sure about what has been said. The information out of the meeting was rather scarce, but we see that with the telephone calls with European leaders and President Zelenskyy of Ukraine have continued, we see that the new effort will be again directed at making a complex negotiation or a complex agreement about peace in Ukraine, which will obviously take more time. Russia's aggression will continue in Ukraine, so we see no actual change on the ground, but we see a lot of policy being changed after the meeting.
But what security guarantees can the US provide along with the Europeans? Because I guess that security guarantees is the key word here.
It is, yes, and it will be one of the key words and key decision or agreements to be made in potential negotiations. Without security guarantees, Ukraine will not be able or will not be in a position to talk about very difficult possibilities of making concessions on possibly on land that would be taken over by Russia as a result of those negotiations. The security agreements basically mean that the US will promise that if Ukraine will be attacked, well, by Russia or anybody else, the US will be there supporting, helping, and trying to defend the country with the Ukrainians and possibly with other allies. A similar framework or a similar agreement the US has with many countries, including Israel and others. And of course, the important part here is, as for Russia, it's a no-go situation that Ukraine enters NATO. It has to be a framework that will be outside the North Atlantic Alliance. And we will see what will be the concrete arrangement that the US, the Europeans, and Ukraine will be talking about in the next few days.
Right, so that's what the West wants to do. But Donald Trump stated after the meeting with Vladimir Putin that, quote, "It's really up to President Zelenskyy to get it done, and I would also say the European nations, they have to get involved a little bit." Now, what do Ukrainians and the rest of Europe have to agree to make the guns fall silent?
Well, that's absolutely not clear at this moment, I would say. It is expected that the Europeans will provide a much stronger force than let's call it usually, or in situations like this in other geographical location. I think that's the expectation. I understand the Europeans see this, they understand also what is their role, and they want to make sure that they can contribute actively. And we see the effort being undertaken under the leadership of Chancellor Merz and President Macron and others. So they are talking actively with President Zelenskyy. What are the requirements? What are the possibilities of Europeans? And they also have to talk to the United States and make sure that they can secure an active US role, at least in some parts of providing the security situation in Ukraine once negotiations will be coming to an end.
I guess there's more to it, and well, there's more from President Trump. Let me quote him again. "We had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to, and there are just a very few that are left." So, what could this bone of contention between the U.S. and Russia be? I guess that's not part of land swap negotiations.
Well, we don't know what they discussed. I mean, we don't have too much clarity on that. But certainly, based on the composition of the delegations, we can estimate that the discussion was mostly, and also from what we heard from President Putin in his remarks, the discussion was about the bilateral relationship between Russia and the U.S., including some kind of solution or or a vision for the sanctions against Russia. Obviously, there is no additional sanctions being put in place, even though there's no ceasefire, as President Trump gave the ultimatum to President Putin. So there's no more sanctions. There are not even secondary sanctions for Russia's customers who buy its oil and gas. So there have been some kind of agreements or arrangements that President Putin and Trump have made. And the big open issue, I would say, is still Ukraine and how to solve the situation there.
Now, before the meeting in Alaska, Donald Trump was asked aboard Air Force One whether he would withdraw some NATO troops from the alliance's eastern flank, and that's the venue he didn't rule out then, nor now. Now, do you think that such a proposal is still on the table?
Well, the U.S. is preparing to do their posture review. They will certainly think about what is the best posture, what is the best structure of units that they want to keep in Europe and in other places in the world. Obviously, the objective or the main priority right now is in the Pacific for them, using their military force to posture and to signal to adversaries and countries in those regions. The good thing is that the Pacific theater and the European theater are very different in nature, and they don't require the same kind of forces. So in that sense, the US will have a bigger scope of possibilities to think about to remain or to keep forces in Europe even after this posture review. But as of right now, I believe the option of reducing the number is still on the table. We will see what will be also the situation in Ukraine and how much of the US involvement it will require.
Now back to something you said in the very beginning of our conversation. So Vladimir Putin came to the US. He was greeted with a red carpet with the American president attending him at the airport. That's actually something that happened for the first time since 1950s. And Vladimir Putin seemed genuinely happy with this trip, as he's not a pariah anymore, but rather a leader equal to the American president, with whom he will decide the fate of Ukraine. And moreover, Trump decided not to impose any more sanctions on Russia and its allies. That's also hugely important. Could he have hope for to gain any more from this visit?
Well, there's probably not much more that he could have gotten from that visit. He was very successful in what actually happened. I mean, his first major bonus or benefit was the meeting itself, right? President Trump has made it possible for them to meet. The U.S. had to even lift some of the sanctions for members of the delegation to attend the meeting. So the U.S. has made really an effort to make this a big meeting at this level. President Trump has given a lot of credit to President Putin. Despite the situation in which he's on, this shouldn't be a meeting of two equivalent presidents, right? I mean, there's a warrant, an international criminal court warrant on one of them. It's just one distinction, but it looked like a meeting of two countries. President Putin even made a very big effort to make sure that everybody understands that Russia and US are neighborly countries. They have a long tradition of relations. They have, a lot in common. They fought together in places and in the history.
Well, then a small victory for Vladimir Putin, although a small, still a significant diplomatic victory for the Russian leader. Martin Sklenar, Slovakia's former defense minister, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching and stay with us for much more here on TVP World.